Jennifer Campbell, creator and host of the Systemic Leadership Summit. Welcome to this session. And in this summit session, we'll be talking about Doughnut economics. What is it? Why is it important? And how is it a different solution from our current economics as we know it? We'll discuss this topic today with two people who have combined their extensive knowledge in economics, the financial world, leadership, management consulting, and teaching. And their names are Kate Raworth and Carlota Sanz. Kate is renegade economist focused on making economics fit for the 21st century. Her book, Doughnut Economics, 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist, is an international bestseller that has been translated into 20 languages and was longlisted for the 2017 Financial Times and McKinsey Business Book of the Year Award. She is co-founder of Doughnut Economics Action Lab, DEAL for short, working with cities, businesses, communities, governments, and educators to turn Doughnut economics from a radical idea into transformative action. She teaches at Oxford University's Environmental Change Institute and is professor of practice at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. Carlota is the co-founder of Doughnut Economics Action Lab and DEAL's strategic lead, a role that combines her background in corporate management consultancy with her passion for regenerative economics. Her work focuses on enabling the concepts of Doughnut economics to be turned into transformative practice while ensuring they spread wide and with integrity. Prior to co-founding DEAL with Kate, Carlota worked for a decade in the financial sector in Spain and in the UK. She was a co-director of Economy for the Common Good in the UK and studied economic transformation at Schumacher College in the UK. A very warm welcome to the both of you. Thank you so much for joining us in the Systemic Leadership Summit.
It's great to be here.
Hi, lovely to be here. Thanks so much for having us.
You're welcome. And of course, we're going to have a conversation about Doughnut economics. And before diving into what it all is and why it's important, I would really like to start off with the other side of it. So what is wrong with the way we set up our economics and our economies the way we've done them up until this point? What's wrong with it, or why? What are consequences of running them the way we do? Who would like to start?
I can start with this one. So I studied economics a while ago now, 15 years ago, and I believe that the economic theories that I was taught and that are still taught, I believe, in most of the universities at the moment, far too much start from a starting point and make assumptions that really are failing to transform us. And I think we see, I think, 3 main issues I'd say that our current economic systems have that are leading us to the state in which we are in now in the world. So firstly, we have inherited economies that are degenerative by design. So they're linear by design. So this means that we're taking Earth's materials, we're making them into stuff, we're using these things, sometimes once, sometimes for a while, and then we're throwing it away. And so we believe that this dynamic of taking, making, using, losing, it's really provoking the ecological degradation that we're seeing in the world. And on the other hand, so that's one part of the story. On the other hand, we've inherited divisive economies. So these are economies that tend to centralize the value and opportunity in the hands of a few. So inequalities keep rising. Oxfam just showed that 10 billionaires just doubled their wealth during the pandemic. And so I think this is insane. And thirdly, we have economies that are focused on endless growth of GDP. So no matter how rich our economies are, the goal is still more growth. So these dynamics, I believe they're causing the huge inequalities that persist of wealth, of power, of gender, across different countries, and they're driving us towards the ecological breakdown and collapse that we're experiencing. So it's clear that we need to transform that economic mindset, the economic structures, so that people and planets, can flourish and thrive in balance.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this intro. So the key words of what's wrong with the old way of building our economies is that they are degenerative, they're divisive, and they're focused on growth all the time. And it leads to collapse instead of the flourishing or thriving of us as a species on this planet. Did I understand that correctly?
Absolutely right. Yes.
And so how then did you come up with the idea of someone building the economies differently, or us, a group, building differently? And how did that lead to the idea of doughnut economics?
I'll jump in. So I too studied economics at university in the early 1990s. And just like Carlota and millions of economics students around the world, I was really frustrated with what I was taught, because it just didn't reflect the ecological and social realities that I could see we face. So I actually walked away from economics, and I worked at the United Nations, I worked for Oxfam, and started reading all of the economic theories I was never taught. So started reading about ecological economics or feminist economics, complexity economics, behavioral economics. And there were amazing ideas in there that were actually, of course, aiming precisely to tackle these degenerative and divisive designs, often focused on critiquing the mainstream neoclassical economics, and each having their own critique. But what frustrated me about it was that if you wanted to talk about ecological economics, they have their conferences and blogs and journals over there. The feminist economists are over here, the complexity economists are over here, and it's all fragmented and segmented. And for me, the exciting idea was, well, what happens if you were to bring all these ideas together and to make them dance on the same page, and actually, rather than seeing them as many different critiques of the mainstream, take inspiration from Buckminster Fuller, who said, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. If you want to change things, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So I set out with a playful goal of saying, well, what happens if we were to draw new diagrams and not just critique the old ones, but actually replace them? It's much easier to critique and say what's wrong than come up with propositionally, okay, then the new one's not going to be right, but it may be more useful, it may be more relevant, it may make things visible that were invisible before. So that was really the inspiration for writing Doughnut Economics. Can we put aside the old, go beyond critique, and actually be propositional? What kind of economic mindset would serve us if we start with the goal of turning around that degenerative, divisive design and actually flourishing and thriving?
Yeah. Wow, I think I think it speaks to so many people that this initial sense of frustration and walking away from old patterns, old theories, old models, old way of looking at things and doing things. And then on the back of that, coming back to something that is much more about integrating rather than critiquing, because critiquing is, like you just said, it has a particular impact, and it's easy. What happens if you collaborate, or what if you put things together? Sounds at least familiar to my ears when we look at the whole existence of the Systemic Leadership Summit that we're in, for example. It had a similar sort of thing. There are many different approaches. What if we integrate them or bring them together? And so could you show us more about the doughnut economics view? I know that you have an integrative overview or model or way of looking at it. Could you show us more about that?
Yep, I'll be happy to. So as I remember mainstream economics, and whenever I ask students around the world, what was the first diagram you were taught? They'll say, oh, it was supply and demand. the market, right? And that's where mainstream economics begins. We put the market at the center of our vision. We should begin somewhere very different. We should begin with the vision and the goal of what it is we seek to achieve, because if we don't spell that out, how on earth will we know what success looks like? So that's what the donut begins with. It begins with a vision, like a compass for human prosperity in the 21st century. So here's a donut. That's the donut. So what we've got here is the hole in the middle is the place where people are falling short on the essentials of life. It says shortfall here on health, education, housing, food, income, political voice. We want no one in the world to be left falling short on the essentials. And indeed, every government in the world has already agreed with this. These are drawn from the Sustainable Development Goals.
Ah, right.
So the world's governments say, leave no one in the hole of the middle of the donut. That is agreed internationally. But as we seek to meet our essential wants and needs, we use resources, we've been using fossil fuels, withdrawing water, converting land, using timber, synthetics, and we start to use earth materials. The danger is that we use earth materials so much that we push beyond this ecological ceiling, where we begin to put pressure on the life support systems of our planetary home. We cause climate breakdown. We acidify the oceans, put so many plastics in the ocean that more plastic than fish. These are the 9 planetary boundaries that have been recognized by Earth system scientists as the life supporting systems that make life work on this planet. And so the goal is to live above this social foundation, but below this ecological ceiling. And the resulting shape, and it's the reason for the name, is it looks like a donut. Now, of course, you don't have to eat donuts. This is the only one that actually turns out to be good for us. It's conceptual, but it's a very, very different shape of what progress looks like. As Carlota said, one of the doctrines at the heart of mainstream economics is endless growth, and growth is good. No matter how rich you already are, more growth is good. Here, the shape of progress is not endless growth, it's balance. It's thriving in this dynamic balance between meeting the needs of all and doing it within the means of the living planet. That's a completely different proposition.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for this intro. And I have a couple of questions about this also, because you say there's this baseline in the middle, like right on the edges of the hole of the donut. And then there are these ceilings. So did the scientists to identify these different areas that we should strive for in order to have human prosperity on the planet? Were those ceilings also determined by them? So did they calculate, or did you somehow determine what those ceilings are?
Really great question. And for many decades, actually, ecological economists have drawn diagrams of the economy contained within the biosphere, contained within the living planet, but they never could quantify or put any metrics against what that ceiling is. And the breakthrough happened in 2009 when a group of Earth system scientists came up with this concept of planetary boundaries. They said, we believe these are the critical life supporting systems. And we're looking back over the history of life on planet Earth. The Earth system scientists said, what in the last 11,000 years of this thriving period of life on planet Earth has been the highest concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? That becomes the limit. So let's not go beyond where we have been. And that's how they created these limits. Now I can just flip this around and show you, this is what they found. And this is the state of the science on the outside here. We're way over on climate change. The limit is around 350 parts per million of greenhouse gases. Well, we're over 415 now. We're over on nitrogen and phosphorus loading. It's much, much higher than has been seen in the record till now. On converting land for human use, on biodiversity and species loss. And actually just last week, the Earth system scientists who said we can't quantify chemical pollution. So this is left blank. Just last week, they quantified it. It's massively overshooting. It's as big as the worst, particularly due to plastics. So this was the sort of new information. And when I first saw that in 2009 or 10, it had a real impact on me, the quantification and making it visible. And that's what prompted me to say, okay, if there's an outer limit of pressure, there's also an inner limit of pressure. We call them human rights, and we can actually look to the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is the data on humanity of how much people are falling short on meeting their essential needs here on food, 11% of people in the world don't have enough food to eat every day. So that red wedge goes 11% of the way towards the center of the circle. It means we want to eliminate all of this shortfall while coming back within these planetary boundaries at the same time. And that is a journey that we've never done before. We've never simultaneously met everybody's needs while reducing our pressure on the planet. And that means every nation, no matter whether it's currently a low income one or a very high income one, every nation is on a transformative journey.
Yeah, yeah. And as you're explaining this, what you don't want the donut to become too thin, in the sense that it's there's pressure inwards from the outside, and from the outside there's pressure towards, from the inside there's pressure towards outside. It makes the donut too thin. And so it raises a whole lot of questions for me. One of them is, how does this relate to, for example, our population? How does this relate to our understanding of human prosperity within the larger ecosystem that we're part of? I mean, there's a certain definition of prosperity that also needs to be at the backbone of all those other goals of what the minimum is that's required. And so there are discussions around, are we overpopulated? Are there too many people? Or is that a matter of perspective? So can you speak to that in terms of how many people are we? What does prosperity mean? And what does that then say about how we go about this transformative journey with the donut economics?
Okay, key and big questions. So I would say, I think we are many people. We are many. Humanity, and and the way we are currently living is particularly dominating human species over other species on the planet. How many can we be, right? And how many could we be to come back to live within planetary boundaries? This is the key question, and it's a very contended one. So I'll give our view. Of course, it takes the use of resources to meet people's needs. It takes resources to provide everyone with food and water and housing and energy and healthcare. So of course, there's a resource use associated with every thriving life. And we want every person alive to meet this social foundation and to live well. But there are very different ways of providing for our wants and needs. And as Carlota said at the beginning, we've inherited systems. The current systems we're using are actually incredibly wasteful of resources. So we've inherited systems that are degenerative by design. And instead of simply saying, oh, there's too many of us, or you know, that we must stop there, we need to transform the systems that we have, because we're already running down the living planet. So we need to create systems that are regenerative by design. Let me show you very simply. So the degenerative, as Carlota was describing, that take, make, use, lose, it's a linear system. And we need to turn our use of Earth's resources into a circular or cyclical one. So the resources are not used up, they're used again and again and again and again. Transforming that in the way we provide for food, the way we provide water, with far more efficiency, but also regenerative design. But also, Carlota mentioned this statistic, 10 billionaires just doubled, the richest 10 men in the world, just doubled their wealth during COVID. And there's extremes of inequality in the world. So talking about population completely misses the other half of the story, which is extraordinary levels of inequality, the rise of a global 1%. And it's actually the wealthy in the world and in every country who have the largest carbon footprint, the largest material footprint. So if we want to live within the means of the planet, if we really want to come back within these planetary boundaries, it's about transforming the intensive use of resources by the world's richest, particularly, to come back with them. It's not about saying that people who currently can't meet their human rights can't do that. They absolutely can. We can meet the rights of all people within the means of the living planet, but we need to transform away from these degenerative and deeply divisive systems we have. And that's why, again, it comes back to transformation in every country. Last thing I'll say is we absolutely know how to stabilize the human population. And it means investing in women's health and girls' education, so that children survive, so that girls are educated, they have opportunity in life, women's voice and empowerment. This in every country has shown that when women are empowered and children survive, women have the ability to make choices about their own family size And that aggregates into a really strong, clear reduction in the number of children born per woman. That means everybody in the family can be better off and that nation can thrive. So if we want to live in the donut, get everybody out of the hole in the middle of the donut. And that enables people to choose to have smaller families. And we all will have a far greater chance of thriving.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, thank you. So one of my next questions was going to be, why is this so important? But to me, you already made that point in terms of the importance of having a more a donut shaped or more circular type of regenerative orientation of how we build our economies then, and how that serves humanity, but also life on the planet as a whole, and that each and every nation could be shaping for itself in collaboration with other nations as well. And so to me, this is very important, but I'm like, what do you then do to show the importance to everyone else? I mean, this is a transformational journey, that there's an invitation there to do it, but there's also a sense of urgency to do it. And so what do you then do to convey this importance to nation leaders, to others who have a big influence on our economies?
I'll jump in, and Carlota also follow, because we're both making presentations in different contexts. And it's always that question of how do you convey the urgency of this? I would say when I first drew the donut in 2012, it was seen as an interesting diagram, although by many, but actually people working within the field of sustainable development, as it was largely called then, several people said, this is the picture we've always missed. And now we have a picture, and the power of having that picture. Doughnut Economics came out in 2017, and I call myself a renegade economist, because it was a way of playfully saying, hey, economics really needs to be transformed. And so the name renegade puts you a little bit at the edge. But all I can say is, since then, the crises in the world and the awareness of these crises, the climate breakdown, the ecological breakdown, the scale of social divisiveness has become so dominant that we just continually being invited to come and talk about these ideas in spaces. We never try to persuade anybody. So we go into spaces where we are invited. But there is a very strong, I think, rising awareness that, yep, the old economic system we have clearly does not work, and it was not designed for this. So we need new designs. And this is one among many ideas that can work. We can also downscale the donut to the level of nations. And there's something very impactful. A colleague of ours, Andrew Fanning, in our team has created over 150 national donuts on a wonderful website called Good Life website under Leeds University. I'd encourage everybody to go there and look up your own nation. There's something very impactful when you're in a room of policymakers, whether they're in the United States or Canada or Norway or the UK or indeed Malawi or China, India, to be able to show them that's the global donut. Now I'm going to show you a set of national donuts, and here's yours. And it's either short falling or overshooting or both. And there's an amazing look on people's faces, especially in countries like Norway and Sweden that the world thinks are doing really well, and they're actually very strongly overshooting planetary boundaries. And there's a kind of a look that you think, yeah, you just got it. You just got that shock of, we can't say we're developed or advanced. There's nothing developed or advanced about overshooting planetary boundaries. We're all developing countries now on a humble and ambitious journey of transformation. So that's always the moment for me that I convey that urgency. I'll show your national donut, and there's a moment of recognition that we too must transform. Carlota, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I want to reiterate that I think, in the last, decade, I do see that people are becoming very aware of the urgency. So the state of humanity that Kate just showed in the picture, the red, it's becoming obvious. And so people are aware. What people are looking for is new ideas on how to challenge and how to solve those challenges that we have. So I can see that there's, more and more students, leaders or national leaders, entrepreneurs are looking for ideas that help them reshape, rethink how we tackle these challenges. So a lot of the work that we do is not so much maybe on convincing or trying to push them towards, but actually offering new concepts, new ideas to help us rethink, to help us transform the way we understand the economy. And so I would say that, rather than convincing or convening, it's more, offering a new space for a new conversation, right? On how we can transform these deeply rooted assumptions of what the economies are or how should they be. And more people are just there. I feel there's been a huge also transformation in the last years on how people are actually recognizing that urgency. And as Kate said, the crisis that we're living, and the 21st century has been a century of repeated crises, and this is showing us how deeply interconnected we all are, and how the current theories that we have are just failing us. And I think there is quite a momentum, and we're seeing it by the traction, and I mean, Doughnut Economics Action Lab deal, we'll speak a bit about it as well, but it's pretty much a response to that energy of people wanting to engage and wanting to bring different ideas into practice.
Yeah. Thank you for speaking to that. So there's a sense of urgency, especially also because of what we see going on in the world and the inevitable overshooting that is just in plain sight for everyone to see and recognize. But what I also find intriguing is then how do all these policymakers or people who are involved, who recognize, who see it, and who are in positions to actually influence this, how are they then mobilized? And one of the things I heard you say is the realization what's happening with my own nation. And because when you look at a global picture, it's the global picture. And when you look at your own nation, and that's your space because you are a policymaker for your country, or is your area or your space of jurisdiction, then all of a sudden it helps you also to tie it to your own sense of responsibility or your own sense of energy, that when you use these ideas, that you actually be able to impact the status quo that's there. And so that ties into my next question, which is then, suppose you've just introduced this, or you've shown people these ideas and you've shared them. Then the next question is, okay, how do we use these then to build or to transform our economies? Because it's a way of looking at things, it's a way of approaching things, but there's so many different starting points with the donut economy as you see it when you look at the donut. So where do you start with this transformational journey?
So when we develop tools, and that's exactly why we exist as Doughnut Economics Action Lab, to share tools in the world, we follow the energy of what people are wanting to create tools around. Ever since I first drew the donut in 2012, people started seeing if they could downscale it. Can we do a donut for the city of Berlin? That was the first thing I saw on Twitter. Somebody was having a workshop in Berlin. Could we do a city donut for Berlin? It's like, okay, that's interesting. People want to do that. They want to bring it not even just to the nation, but to their city or their town. So we've been working really hard over the last couple of months, actually, to create a wonderful tool that I'm very excited that we're about to release. It's called the Doughnut Unrolled, and it dives you into unrolling the donut and looking at your own place through 4 different lenses. So I'll give us the question, and we're running these workshops, whether it's with Barcelona or Copenhagen or Amsterdam or Bhutan. Places around the world are using these tools for their own transformation. So the question is this: how can our locality become a home to thriving people in a thriving place, while respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? And so what's going on in there are 4 questions. What would it mean for everyone in this place to thrive? What is a good life here? So if we're talking about this social foundation, what does it look like here to say that everybody is thriving here? And that's going to depend upon the culture, the values, the history of a particular place and the diversity of people who live there. And then we ask, how can this place be as generous as the wildland next door? So it's the ecological lens of this place. If wherever each one of us is in the world, we were to go to the healthiest natural habitat, the wildland next door, how is nature thriving here? Nature has a genius in every place and figures out how to store carbon and store groundwater and house wildlife and cleanse the air. And what if the places we live aimed to be as generous as nature there? So these are the local aspirations, but every place may have local aspirations to have a great life for the people and wonderful, healthy ecosystem, but we have to put it in the context of a global responsibility. So how do we make sure that the way we live here respects the health of the whole planet, our global carbon footprint, our global material footprint, which may have impacts on people very far away? And how do we respect the well-being of all people? Everyone who makes the clothes we use or the electronic devices we depend upon or the food that's imported, how do we respect workers' rights through global supply chains? So that's a lot I just talked about. And we make it as like a canvas on the wall and invite people to put issues that are arising and to find the interconnections between them, because it's, as with any systems thinking, it's about the interconnections that you start to see that the patterns show up in multiple spaces, and unpacking all of that gives you a new sort of energy and possibilities to see things, to come up with solutions that we couldn't see before. So that's just one of the ways in which we invite people to really start putting it into practice. Make it make sense where you are, adapt it to your context and lean into that exploration. So we don't do studies for other cities and other places because we're not from there. We say, find an institution, an organization locally that can do this and hold it, and it's your analysis and your exploration and your journey. And we'd love to learn back from how you're using the tools.
Yeah. Wow. So what I hear in that, especially also as you're explaining about the new tool and a way of working and inviting people to make it work for them locally, is I see so many systemic threads in that. For example, the beautiful effect of isomorphy, that if it works here, if we can make it work here in our locality, in our nested system, a small piece of this larger ecosystem in the world, as a nested system, if we can make it work here, then connect to what's around us, we can make it work in the larger sense. So that's what I hear. But also what's happening in the interconnectedness. What is the systems intelligence that we come up with ourselves as we apply this tool, so that we can then learn, and as we interact, we can learn more as we create more connections and stronger connections as we're all applying this. So I find it fascinating the way you describe that and how you work with that. So it's called Unrolling the Doughnut. Is that what you said?
It's called the Doughnut Unrolled.
The Doughnut
And just
Unrolled.
to add a little comment in there, I think that one of the values of having this, let me call it a sort of a top level concept, you can always pull back out, because when you dive in there are of course endless interconnections and it could feel overwhelming. So there's something valuable I think we're seeing in being able to pull out, and you can see the whole, and it's these 2 rings. But then actually there's 21 dimensions here, and each one of them is quite complex. And then the relationship between them. So you can pulse between that rich complexity and then get the relief of a bit of a big view again. And there's, because of course, complexity can be overwhelming. It can be exhausting. It's never ending. And it's really important that when people feel then motivated to approach this topic of actually urgency of transformation, that the process of engaging in it doesn't overwhelm. And so we need tools that enable us to step back and see the whole, but then enable us to dive in again. And again, so I think it's really important for us as we learn to make these tools to build in activities that do that. I'll just add one thing, which is the name The Doughnut is, of course, a very playful name. And some people say, why would you call this, this concept, which is about transforming the world and saving humanity. Why would you give it such a light-hearted name? Sometimes it's important to signal that you can bring play, you can bring humor, and we can have fun even while we tackle the world's most intractable problems. That's what makes people feel invited and welcome to show up and bring their own ideas and their own playful way of reinterpreting it.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say almost to put, not necessarily to counterbalance, but to put next to all the complexity and the zooming in, something we also talk about in this summit is the ability to zoom out, because when you zoom out, you don't only see more, but you don't get lost into the zoomed in detail. And going back and forth can also give you different information and different ways to indeed either play with it or relate to it in so many different ways. So yeah, makes a lot of sense. So this is one tool and one example of how you from the deal, when I look at your lab, your Action Lab, do you have additional examples that you could share with the Systemic Leadership Summit and everyone who's watching of how you work?
Sure, I can draw up on those, I think. Yeah, so just pulling back a bit of, deal and how deal starts, I think it's really important to understand that all of our work, it's rooted really into generating that action, but also experimenting. So we really see the work that we're doing as an experiment of, what would it mean to learn from and with others, what it means to co-create an economy. So in a nutshell, a lot of the work that we do is really co-creating tools and resources and, sharing them and putting them out there so that others can pick them up in different areas. So we're working across different areas. Kate just mentioned the tools that we're putting out there on localizing in places. And we're also working in education, in communities, arts, also business, how we engage with business in bringing this transformation. And I think that before going into examples, I also think it's important to bring some of the, the strategic, some strategic principles or approaches that we're bringing into this work, or the spirit in which we're doing into this work. So we mentioned before how we're not trying to convince people, we're going where the energy is, and this really shapes a lot of then the work that comes up or emerges throughout our work, right? And there's a lot of people doing this work already and wanting to engage, but also the importance of constantly unleashing the peer-to-peer inspiration. So a lot of what we do is about making visible, the innovations that pioneers are already doing through the tools of Doughnut economics in bringing about these ideas into practice in their context. So we also always say that we really believe that change is going to happen by people being inspired by other people. So, and we're seeing how mayors are being inspired by other mayors, teachers by other teachers, business people by business people. And so for us, making visible the work of others is extremely important. I'm going to give a bit, maybe one of our biggest experiments, I would say, at Deal was to create indeed Deal's community and an online platform. So the space that we've created so that the practitioners and the Doughnut economics community connects and learn from each other and inspire each other. So here's where we're putting sharing the open access tools, and also asking people to share back the stories of how they're using these tools, so that we can bring in these reinforcing and feedback loops, and hence inspiring others to act and to do the same. So the Deal's online platform, I would say it's probably one of our first, it sits at the heart of our work, and it was one of the first attempts and actions that we took to actually put these ideas into practice. And we're just delighted to see everything that's coming back, right, to the platform, and how people are engaging and sharing. So yeah, the platform, we could speak to many examples, I guess. Kate, I don't know if anything else comes up for you.
Well, the peer-to-peer inspiration, I'll just re-echo that, because it's been so powerful. And it's one thing for one of us to say on a podcast or stand on a stage, oh, what if cities really engaged with the donut as a concept for imagining their future? That's one thing. But when a mayor or a vice mayor or a city councillor in one place says publicly, we're using the donut to reimagine our future, that just has a completely different effect on their peers, who can see somebody like themselves already doing something that they had thought was beyond possibility or they hadn't yet imagined. So it's about recognizing whose voice is really inspirational to whom, and elevating those and making those spaces. And it's exciting to see, because this is systems thinking about the reinforcing feedback of inspiration of others. And I was deeply inspired by Donella Meadows ever since I read Thinking in Systems. And so I'm often using her 12 leverage points in my mind. And it's really exciting working with others to create an organization where we're intending to bring about some of those leverage points, and hey presto, they start happening. Or of course they don't happen and things don't quite go, and you go back and say, what haven't we got in place? Why isn't that feedback loop yet happening? How do we redesign our platform to really make that feedback from the community to ourselves happen? So it's a wonderful experiment in creating a commons resource and using best we can of systems thinking to really design for this co-creative commons process.
And maybe one thing I can add as well, I think, which is crucial to the work we do and how we do it. So in designing Deal, we're in essence putting ideas in the commons, as Kate was just saying. And so we're inviting others to innovate with those concepts. And so we're constantly balancing openness with integrity. So we need to make sure that while inviting everyone to engage with these concepts, that we're also defining the boundaries, the guidelines to protect the integrity of how the concepts are being put into practice. And so a lot of the work that we're doing as well right now, and one of the core questions for us is, well, how can we continue to spread and to amplify these tools, these concepts, while retaining this integrity? And so the way in which we are designing the relationship with these change makers that are effectively taking the tools and doing them is essential for us, right? So there's a lot of work, especially in this past year, after a couple of years of the community really existing and engaging, we're now really redefining and reshaping and rethinking, well, how can we design this community so that we can, of course, be open and invite for that innovation, but at the same time, what are the boundaries that we need to put in place so that the concepts don't get misused or co-opted in the process? Because that would be, for sure, that would mean that we were undermining the transformation, the potential that the donut and the ideas have. So a lot of the work that we're doing as well at Deal is, around balancing that openness with integrity. And I think that's a very unique aspect of our work, I think.
Yeah. Thank you for the examples and for speaking to that. And just to, as a follow-up question, it sounds to me that with the integrity, you're so also focused on how can we add to the other living human systems around us to engage, to work with the pioneers, to work with the leaders, to help people generate new ideas, to integrate what we offer them as something to look at and to see where the leverage points are, where the people are. And in doing all that, what are the things that you then do to keep your own system, which is the lab, as a healthy living human system? What is it that you do to feed that also? Because you do get feedback, you do get with the feedback loops and with the feedback from the community. I can only imagine that generates a lot of energy for your system. But what are other things that you do that keep your system healthy?
Yeah, this is a beautiful question, I think, and one that it's very alive for us. But I think the first thing that comes to me, we're a small team. So the deal team, it's a small team. So we've gone from 3 to 11, and most of this expansion has gone through the pandemic, right? So we've had to really create our own systems and our own feedback loops to make sure that the team is thriving. And of course, with all the energy and really energy out there in the community and traction and workload, how do we keep ourselves? And I mean, first thing that comes into mind, there's a big sense of at least taking care for each other within the team. And so how can we create spaces within the way in which we work, the way in which we relate to this work and to the community out there, in which we're constantly allowing ourselves to check in with each other and to also nurture that kind of more human, obviously, side of everyone. And I think there's something beautiful in our team and in the work that we're doing. It's for sure this big sense of purpose and aligned purpose, which brings us together very much. So it's a team that it's really building trust and respect in each other, and that way we are surely helping each other evolve and shape the work that we're doing in a way that is healthy. And of course, there's also a question of an attention of, all that energy and all that work that needs to be done and wants to be done, and the urgency of doing it. And so we are also, I think that we ask each other to make us accountable for the amount of energy that we're giving as well. So I checking a lot and with Kate, how are you? How are we feeling about each of the challenges that we're trying to grasp and resolve. But yeah, I definitely think there's a lot around, giving us the space and putting in place the practices that are needed to be there so that we can nurture that side of our work too.
Yeah. Thank you. And one of the key words that I heard you mention is to find the energy in the purpose that you have, that you work very purpose driven, but that there's also a high amount of care, of self-care in your system, in your small ecosystem. And you have expanded also because there are more people who hold this purpose, but also it is needed to do what you do and to contribute to the outside world and to ignite all this, what is being pioneered in different communities and groups and organizations, where people want to work with what you have to offer. And so could you then share with us, because we're also talking within the context of the Systemic Leadership Summit, and I'd like to focus on the word leadership for a second. So how has working within Deal and being on purpose, how has that shaped your leadership? And how does that leadership also impact other leaders of other groups or living human systems?
I'm happy to jump in here as a first thought. And since I know that you have so many phenomenal speakers and thinkers in this leadership summit, contributing so much wisdom about many aspects of leadership, I won't try and come in from that space. I'm going to come in from a different angle. One angle, we've seen a lot of people talking about leadership in the business world. There's clearly a huge importance of a brilliant leader who can inspire, who can hold the purpose, who can motivate others within their organization. But there's also seems to be in the business world a limit to how far a leader can really transform a company if that company's design itself is not transformed. So let me pedal back to where we are. We in Deal really believe that the organizations, whether they're companies or NGOs or universities or foundations of that the 21st century really depends upon. If we're going to become regenerative and distributed by design, we need organizations to be designed in ways that also helps that bring that about. Yes, leadership, but the design underneath it as well. And so we have these 5 design traits that we learned from brilliant analyst Marjorie Kelly. So let's talk about the design of any organization. First, we've been talking about, let's start with purpose. What is your purpose? And of course, the leader plays a huge role in speaking to this purpose and holding it and bringing it to life and motivating others around it. But why does the organization exist, and what is it in service to in the world? How is it networked? How do you relate to your customers or your employees or your clients or suppliers or your allies in change? How do you build those relationships and use those and make sure through those relationships you reinforce your purpose? How are you governed? Who has voice in decision making? What are the metrics of success? What are the norms and practices, as well as the hard rules, the soft culture of how things get done in an organization? But then going really deeper, how is an organization owned? Is it owned, if it, in the world of business, you know, it can be owned by its employees, by a co-op, it can be owned by venture capital, by shareholders, by the state, but also many organizations are owned in very different ways. Does that ownership of the organization really speak to and support and serve the purpose? And because the ownership profoundly shapes how it's financed, where that finance comes from, what that finance expects and demands, and how the profits or revenue are distributed. So let me come to Deal, and I'll speak a little bit about, I'm sure Carlota will jump in. So the purpose is really clear, and it's in our name, Doughnut Economics Action Lab. We exist to put the ideas of Doughnut Economics into action, and it's a lab, it's experimental. And our purpose is to work with others to learn about how to help these ideas spread and scale. I'm going to jump to ownership, actually, because when it became clear to me as I was presenting the book, Doughnut Economics, people started saying to me, you know, there needs to be an organization that helps bring together all the different people who want to put this together. And I started having this feeling of, my goodness, maybe I need to help set up an organization, which, to be honest, was not something I had ever intended to do. And it was really obvious to me that I did not want to be a sole founder. I did not want to be, as it were, at the kind of top of a pyramid, the CEO, the director, the founder. It's just not a role I've ever wanted to play. And also, I think this is about distributed network work, so it didn't feel right. It was really important to me to co-found Doughnut Economics and to show that it's collaborative right from the start. And actually to separate myself as the author of the book from the ideas. So actually to let those ideas, they're now in the commons. So the ideas, if you come across these diagrams, they don't have my name on it. They have the name of Doughnut Economics Action Lab. So it's about separation between a person who may have once been a source of ideas, but now the ideas have their own form and there's a community that holds them. So when I met Carlota, actually, almost as soon as I met her and we started talking, I just had this very strong sense. I feel a very strong sense of purpose and vision and alignment and a sense of shared understanding of how to bring about change. And so we decided to co-found Doughnut Economics Action Lab together. So I've just spoken to the purpose and to the ownership. And I know you asked me about leadership, but for me, actually, all of this design is, to me, how I would say, this is a really key part of leadership. You need to design your organization in a way that actually allows it to pursue its purpose. Carlota, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, and just to reiterate that, I think it's such a different way to also understand leadership. And I think it's about locking in that leadership within the organizational design so that it can last forever, right? And yeah, so I'll just continue, and I'm now reflecting of how we're doing this at Deal. I think finance was also a crucial, like deciding how we would fund ourselves at the beginning and how should this work be funded. And we were very, very clear at the beginning that if we wanted to create this organization and to do this work, the way in which it should be funded needed to be completely aligned to the purpose. So we undertook for the first year, 18 months, there was a lot of energy and care put into bringing together the group of funders that would really be aligned with that purpose so that they could fund us, giving us the flexibility and trusting that we would, be leading the work that we're doing. So having that finance completely aligned to the purpose, we always say that finance should never drive the work. It should be the work, being supported by that finance. And so set ourselves, we're fully core funded at the moment, and also always making sure that those who are contributing to their funding are aligned and share the ambition of Doughnut economics. So I think that's a very important aspect of how we're bringing out that work. And then governance, I think, as well. So as I said, we're a small team. We're fully remote at the moment, and really seeking to be a distributed organization and to distribute decision-making amongst the whole team. We are all leads, actually. I think that's a very important how we set our roles, and we like to understand each of us as leaders in our different areas and in the different responsibilities that we hold within our roles. And so there's a lot of, setting up processes and systems that allow that distributed decision-making, and not only within the deal team, but also within the community. So there's a lot of thinking of how can we bring in the community in helping us answer a lot of the strategic questions that we're navigating. So yeah, there's a lot of thought, I think, and care put in how and when should we be bringing in those voices within the communities, depending on the different strategies or work that we're grasping and that we're tackling. And networks, well, I mean, everything that we do is about, the relationships with others, what are the, who are we working with? And we've always said, and we've been clear that we're putting those ideas and tools there so that change makers and organizations that are aligned with our purpose take them and spread them wide. I think this comes, there's another strategic principle that we hold very deeply to, which is don't be the movement, join the movement. So we always say that we are creating and co-creating tools so that others can integrate it in their work, and we're part of a much bigger system of change, and therefore we need to really, nurture those relationships and work together. So who and how you nurture those networks really shape what we can bring. So yeah, I think that it's nice to actually look at those 5 design traits as a way of explaining how, at least from the beginning, we've tried to really embed somehow the principles also of Doughnut economics, right? A lot of the leadership and a lot of how we're doing this work is by, as much as possible, putting those principles into practice in our own internal design. Yeah.
Thank you so much for speaking to that, because I think that there's this never-ending conversation about leadership and leaders, and what's linear about it and what's circular or systemic about it. And I feel that as you were sharing those 5 principles of let me see if I have them. So purpose and network and governance and ownership and finance. Phew. And so it's a matter of how is a system designed, and how is the organization designed, but also how is a nation designed, and whether it's a nation or organization or a community, there needs to be leadership there. And what I hear you say is that it's constantly about actually infusing every aspect or every sub aspect of deal, but also of all the other systems that you work with something that is distributed when it comes to leadership, that it's co-owned, that there is ownership spread all over, instead of the more old-fashioned linear way of shaping leadership, or just putting hats on people's heads and saying, okay, you're responsible for this and this now, instead of having that energy flow through the system and it being picked up by many different people, so that it becomes something that is not just sustainable, but that you can actually create something that is thriving. Because many are contributing to it, and it generates a lot of strong relationships, strong engagement, and on-purpose action. And
Yeah.
so,
can I just jump in, Jennifer, because just
sure.
another point that's come to me on this. So I should have also said the way we're actually owned, we're incorporated in the UK, and we're owned as a community interest company, which means that we are in service of the purpose, and revenue and income can't be withdrawn from the company. If we were to close it down, it wouldn't be paid out. That money would go to another organization that shares that purpose. So it locks in the ownership, locks in the finance in service of the purpose. No matter whether Carlota or I were there, as she said, it's not about the individual person, it's about locking it over time. But I wanted to say another way that it's we really seek to distribute it is we're often invited to give keynote speeches at conferences in countries or regions all around the world. And that tends to drive the focus of, and it's wonderful that we're invited, but there are amazing practitioners in every region actually putting these ideas into practice. So something I've been really enjoying doing on receiving an invitation for a keynote speech is to say, for example, that one came up in India recently. And I thought, well, hang on, we've got some fantastic partners in India who are using the concepts of donut economics in their work. So let me ask, if I go back to the organizers and say, can we turn this keynote into a co-note? I'd like to bring a fellow speaker. I'll share the broad concepts, but this person can actually talk about what it's like to put these ideas into practice in your country, in your region. And again, it's that peer-to-peer inspiration. The examples they bring will speak to your context in a way that I can't possibly do. And so it's about the collaborative is also in that co-note of handing the mic to somebody in your region so that it's bringing it closer to home. And that's a real pleasure to do, because it gives someone an opportunity on a platform that actually really furthers their work and is of real genuine interest to the audience.
Yeah. And how this speaks to me is that what you're actually saying by doing that is it's the spreading of the ownership, and also it puts everyone else who's also part of that or who's part of the audience, basically, to put them in a more active state, rather than in, oh, here's the expert and they're going to tell us, and then we're going to see if we can then lead it to other people who haven't been part of this presentation or this keynote speaking. But it's more passing on the invitation, and passing on the invitation where the co-creation and the co-ownership then happens, if I understand you correctly.
Exactly. And often the co-speaker is somebody who's set up a network. I did one with somebody in Ireland, and she said, well, we've got the Ireland Doughnut Economics Network and you can join. So exactly as you just said, the audience is not passive. I'm listening to somebody from somewhere else talking about an idea. I don't know if it'd work here, but oh, there's somebody following saying it's already in action here. If you want to join, here's how. So yes, it makes everybody much more active.
Yeah. And so, wow, there's so many other questions that I would like to ask you, but I have only time for a few more. And one of them is, from where you sit right now, with all the experience that you've had with Deal up until this point, for everyone who is watching, if they want to also join the movement, or if they want to work with these principles that you shared in this conversation that we're having in the context of the SLS, where can they start? Maybe besides being part of your action lab, or joining in or using one of the tools, what are things that they can do in the here and now to start contributing to more of a donut type of economy?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna first, of course, invite everyone who's interested in these ideas to join the platform, also because that's a way. So I think one first thing that they can do is to connect with others who are already doing these, or that have started, and start taking steps in connection with others. So I think that there's something really powerful of looking for those change makers within your community, within your neighborhood, within the place that you live, that are interested in having a conversation. And I think that, actually having a conversation is something very immediate that someone can start, and opening a conversation about these ideas, because we're saying we're really interested in changing mindsets, right? Like in paradigm change. So really just step forward and have an open conversation about the need for the transformation and how these ideas can be put into practice in a place. And we've seen just an amazing energy arising just from change makers in worldwide, just spontaneously coming up and putting an event and holding an event. Who wants to speak about these ideas here now? And that is now those processes are now like evolving into really different initiatives and projects, very different in every place of the world, right? So that's something comes to mind. Just start and connect with others that are doing or that are interested in doing this work.
And I'll just add in, the tools that we create can be used by any organization. So we would love people to join the platform because we are aiming to create a commons. So we are really passionate about innovative ways of sharing ideas in the 21st century commons. And one of the fundamental principles of a commons is clear membership. So by joining the platform, you signal, I want to be a member of this work. Join the platform, and then when you join, you'll see there may be plenty of other people in your country, region, town. It's like, oh, as Carlota just said, let's meet up. What are you doing? What are you interested in? But also you can take it into existing organizations. So again, it's about, don't be the movement, join the movement. Take it into your ongoing network, social movement, NGO. We're creating tools that if it looks useful to you, great, integrate it, and then just with this reciprocity, the feedback loop of systems thinking, please share back, because we are sharing these ideas in the commons, we're putting them out. You don't have to pay a price to use them. You need to qualify to show you're eligible through your organizational design. But when they're in the commons, we ask that you share back. That's the condition of use, because your sharing back, we know, will have huge inspiration for others. So I would say to people, go browse our platform. You don't have to join it to browse it. Read the stories from what people are doing. Does it inspire you? If it does, dive in and use it. We've never once lobbied, recommended, pushed, tried to persuade anybody to use these tools. We don't, that's not how change happens. And it doesn't feel like a good place to be trying to push people, persuade. People understand the context they're in. They are a best place to see the opportunity, to see existing organizations and tools. Let them be the judges of, that looks useful to me. And it's when people say that, someone says, that looks useful to me, I want to do that here. That's when we say, let's get in touch, let's talk, and we can put you in touch with others who are doing it too. And that's how we aim to spread this work. It's incredibly energizing when you see it.
Yeah, I can imagine, because there's this huge invitation and there is no obligation. So what happens is that, like someone, I know how that works for me, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, is that when there is this curiosity there and you start exploring and you see things, and then you envision how that could work within your own context, what's there not to like? The threshold to then try it in your own context and see how it engages others again can be a real trigger and can be a real way of creating energy and new connections and new ways of introducing or inviting to the transformative journey for systems big and small, to see how can we do it in such a way that that shapes it to that circular orientation rather than linear, and to go more to the regenerative. So yeah, I think this could be a really good idea for everyone who's watching to just go. What I'll do is I'll make sure that the link to it is underneath the video so that people can browse and see for themselves what they find and what inspires them. And so before we close off, I'd like to go to an even bigger picture, because this is about what our viewers can do. And I am just looking at a bit further down the road, and I'd like to ask you, when you go there, what you think you'll find, because at least what I see is that there are many, all of a sudden there's seems to be, with all these crises, a lot more anticipation towards the climate crisis and the climate change. And as we're talking about focusing on the regenerative rather than the degenerative, where do you think that we are all heading, and what's coming up in the next few years when you look through the lens of your action lab?
I'm happy to jump, and I'm sure Carlota will add. This is a critical decade. We know that. We know that from climate scientists. And it's time for action. And that's why we founded an action lab. There's plenty of theory. Now let's put these ideas into practice. I think what we are seeing, and we're very much in touch with people who are seeding these new possibilities. And there's something very energizing in having the privilege of working with community groups and cities and nations and teachers who say, yep, I'm doing this. I'm starting to do this. And I think these coming years we'll see these seeds of possibility spreading and scaling. And yet, let's be honest, the degenerative practices will continue. The divisive dynamics continue. These are going to be turbulent times. So some people find that very overwhelming. Some people become pessimistic and say it's too late, we're too many, it's too hard, it's too complex, there's too much power. And I can go there on a dark night, and you can go there. But if we go to that place, we help make it true. It becomes a reinforcing feedback. It becomes performative of us. If we say it's too late, well, yep, then it becomes too late because there's no one in action. I also think there's a danger at the other end of being optimistic and saying, don't worry, no, crisis, humanity's done crisis before, we can handle this, we're innovative, we'll come up with new solutions. Don't sit back in restful optimism, because it ain't just going to happen. There's a lot of pressures against transformation happening. So we're in the space of that kind of active possibility. It's only going to be possible if we actually act on it and hold it. So yes, recognize the degenerative implications and impacts that are already locked into the system and will continue, but keep, as Donella Meadows would tell us, keep standing in the space of possibility, keep speaking loudly and clearly from the paradigm that is possible, and keep pointing to people who are already putting it in practice. And don't waste your energy getting caught in fierce debate with people who massively counter you. Speak to the reasonable, wide middle who are actually looking for transformative possibility, and then make it practical, make it visible, and show examples of how it's already happening. So that, as Carlota said right at the beginning, this is our biggest experiment of creating this community, trying to put these ideas into practice. Do we know if it'll work? We can't possibly know if it'll work, but these are the times for experiments like these. Carlota.
Yeah, I mean, and keep holding that ambition. I think that in the next few years, I think that's also what's going to determine whether there's a chance to really change what we have. And I think we really need to be true to that, new paradigm, as Kate was saying. I always remind myself, okay, talk to those who already believe that, because there are, and that's going to trigger inspiration. And I'm quite curious, and I think, in this spirit of experimentation and of really learning, we're seeing a lot of traction, a lot of interest. I was saying there's a lot of interest in these ideas, and people are engaging, and leaders are, coming forward and being courageous and trying to pick them up. And I'm really interested to see, we're going to start seeing patterns that are going to emerge through this work we've just started. And so really being aware of that learning and bringing these feedback loops to all the work that everyone is doing, so that we can really learn from each other, because this has never been done before. I think that's also really important to remind ourselves that, leaders and cities and places that are talking about doing the Doughnut, well, that's big, and of course we're still in an old paradigm, so those tensions and things are going to emerge, and we will learn together, what does it really mean in practice. So let's stay open as well and flexible to really create that space for innovation and for the new, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that about to to continuously position yourself in that space of possibility, and knowing that the degenerative is there, and that we are in that transition, we are in that option of transitioning from the old to the new paradigm when it comes to and building new patterns when it comes to creating something that is away from the linear, something that is regenerative, something that is healthier actually for all of us on the planet, and not just human beings, to live and to thrive. And it's up to us to see what we'll end up with. Are we going to indeed end up with a way of doing it that is much healthier and much more energizing? And I just think these in that sense, when you put that light on it, these are really exciting times, because there is this huge opportunity. And I think it's amazing that that is exactly where your purpose is with the Doughnut Economics Action Lab. So we've come to the end of our conversation, and I'd like to say thank you so much, Carlota and Kate, for being in conversation with me about Doughnut economics and what it means, why it's so important, and also by sharing numerous examples of how you work, of your principles, of the principles that you also hold both for leadership and for organization design, and for the regenerative, energizing action that you are trying to put all around you, and that you're very mindful also about what that means for your own organization. So thank you so much for being in conversation with me today.
Thank you. And actually, this is the first time we've been in such a conversation about deal. So it's a really lovely opportunity, I think, for us to have wonderful questions from you and to reflect on our own organizing. So thank you very much.
Indeed, it's been a real pleasure sharing with you and reflecting, as Kate said, also about all of our work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And for everyone who's been watching, thank you so much for watching and for tuning into this session. If you would like to have a further conversation about what you heard that Kate and Carlota shared today, then please go to our online community space. I look forward to meeting you there. Thanks again for tuning in. See you in the next Systemic Leadership Summit session. Bye-bye.